Hello and welcome to Nice and Blunt. It's week 11 and it's time to talk wide receiver rankings. There's a bunch of studs who have great matchups this week and are locked in top 10 plays, but then there's also a bunch of players who are usually inside the top 20 with very difficult matchups. So it's a little bit tricky in that wide receiver 2 region. So let's try and get you ready for this week and get that W. These are my top 40 half PPR wide receiver rankings for week 11. Let's go. At number 1, I got Davante Adams at Minnesota, and I think the fact that Aaron Jones is not in this game really bodes well for Davante Adams in the passing game. Whenever Davante Adams has missed a game, Aaron Jones has really needed to step up in the receiving game, and I think the vice versa logic applies to Davante Adams. So I think he's going to get a minimum of 12 targets in this game. He's going to be leaned on very heavily, and Aaron Rodgers is going to target him early and often. I like him as a number 1 play this week. At number 2, I got Tyreek Hill versus Dallas, and this game has a shit ton of shootout potential. I think Tyreek Hill is going to have a great game. There's no way you're benching either of these players. At number 3, I got Deebo Samuel at Jacksonville, and he's getting the ball in many different ways. Last week, to avoid Jalen Ramsey, he had 5 rush attempts, and he capitalized on every touch that he got. So Deebo Samuel is an integral part of the San Francisco offense, and he is a top 5 wide receiver rest of season. At number 4, Stephon Diggs had a huge game last week, and it was about time. He had kind of been a little bit lagging behind from what we expected coming into the year, and I think that connection between him and Josh Allen, it was inevitable for it to blow up, and I think it's going to continue to happen rest of season. This is a good matchup against Indianapolis, who give up a lot of touchdowns to wide receivers, and I think one of them will go to Stephon Diggs this week. He'll probably eclipse 100 yards once again, so that's why I have him at number 4. At number 5 is CeeDee Lamb, who technically has a bad matchup against Kansas City. However, I don't fully read into this red shading here. The last 2 games weren't really against the best opponents like Jordan Love, and the Raiders really disappointed last week. So they are definitely getting things together, and they're not as bad as they were to start the year, but I don't think they're going to be able to contain CeeDee Lamb. And I know that's not how you spell his full name. That's just how I like to abbreviate it. At number 6, Marquise Brown at Chicago. And there's a little bit of question mark with Lamar Jackson. He's missed the first 2 practices this week with an illness. It's not COVID. However, if he doesn't come back in time, then that really is going to take a big hit to Marquise Brown's fantasy value. But I do think that he will play. I don't think Lamar Jackson will miss, and I think Marquise Brown is a very steady and safe top 10 wide receiver. At number 7, I got A.J. Brown versus Houston. And now that I trust him once again, I really, it's almost impossible to rank him outside the top 10 with all of that touchdown upside, especially with Julio Jones on IR. There's nobody else that's really competing for targets in Tennessee other than A.J. Brown. So very, very safe floor. He doesn't have a bad matchup like he did last week. At number 8, Keenan Allen versus Pittsburgh, and I think after the bye, the target disparity between him and Mike Williams is really considerable, and I think Keenan Allen has established himself once again as the number 1 wide receiver in LA for the Chargers. So that's why I got him inside the top 10. I think he's a very safe bet. He's seen double-digit targets in each of the last 3 games. At number 9 is Jamar Chase at Las Vegas, who I think will bounce back. He had a rough game right before the bye week, and I think him and Joe Burrow will have a very good connection. They had 2 rough losses right before that bye week, so I think they're extra motivated. I think Jamar Chase is the player you want, a top 10 wide receiver. At number 10, I got Mike Evans versus the Giants, and I think he is a very safe bet to score a touchdown. He gets a lot of those deep targets, and he usually takes one to the house. So there's really no way to justify benching Mike Evans. He is a very consistent wide receiver. Same goes for Chris Godwin, who I have at 11 right behind him. And the only concern that I have for these 2 players for the Buccaneers is the fact that Antonio Brown returned to practice this week. He was spotted today. And if he plays, then obviously that limits the target volume for these 2 wide receivers. So I still think that they're inside the top 12. You're not going to bench him. But they may get fewer red zone looks if both Antonio Brown and Rob Gronkowski are back on the field. At number 12 is DK Metcalf versus Arizona. And I don't really trust this Seattle offense. It's really not looking good this year, even with Russell Wilson. And I think Arizona is really going to know how to shut this team down, the division rival. They're going to play them very tough, and it's going to be quite difficult. But I think if you're going to start one of these wide receivers in Seattle, it's definitely going to be DK Metcalf. At number 13, I got Deontay Johnson at the Chargers, who has a bad matchup. Derwin James, Asante Samuel Jr. are going to give him a rough time. But I still trust the volume. He's definitely the number one receiver for Ben Roethlisberger, and he's getting double-digit targets very consistently. So I trust the floor, but I'm not really convinced that he scores a touchdown, and I'm not sure he goes over 100 yards either. So still a top 15 guy, but just not the most upside. Justin Jefferson is my number 14 wide receiver this week versus Green Bay, and I kind of feel like this is too low, but I really trust the Green Bay defense. They've been playing lights out this year, and even without Jair Alexander, they are great in the secondary. So I think Justin Jefferson may struggle a little bit. I think Kirk Cousins is going to have a rough time in this game, and that's why I only have Justin Jefferson at number 14. At number 15 is Terry McLaurin at Carolina, and I may have him a little bit too high. I feel like this is more of just a respect ranking. It's hard for me to bench Terry McLaurin. But Carolina has a great defense, and it's not just the run defense that is elite. Their secondary is really good. So he's probably going to get the bulk of Stephon Gilmore coverage, and this may be some very tough sledding ahead for Terry McLaurin. I wouldn't be surprised if he is held to like 5 catches for 50 yards and no score. And then at number 16, I got Antonio Brown versus the Giants, who I expect to make his debut. And there's some stats that point to Antonio Brown being the best wide receiver on the Bucs, but I think dealing with this injury, he may be limited just a little bit, and that's why I only have him at number 16. But I really trust Antonio Brown. I would not want to bench him as long as he suits up. I think he's one of the go-to targets for Tom Brady, and in this offense, there's always a lot of scoring potential. So give me Antonio Brown as a must-start top 20 play in Week 11. And then at number 17, I got Brandon Cooks at Tennessee, who has a great matchup. And the only concern with Brandon Cooks is whether or not he gets into the end zone. It's been kind of unlikely this year. He hasn't scored that many touchdowns, but I think the volume is always going to be there. He's always the number one in Houston. And I think with Tyrod Taylor throwing the ball, I think there's a bit more upside. Tennessee's secondary is really bad, and they're not going to be able to stop him. I'm just not sure he gets into the end zone, so that's why he's just more of a floor play, but a very high floor this week against Tennessee. At number 18, I got Mike Williams versus Pittsburgh, who has not been as safe of a player since the bye week. His target volume has come down, and without the touchdowns, the floor is really low. So there's a little bit more risk with Mike Williams. I do think he will bounce back at some point. However, I think that opposing defenses have taken a look at the film of the Chargers, and if they can contain Mike Williams, then they have a much better chance of beating the Chargers. So they make that a bit of a priority, and that's why Mike Williams is kind of struggling at the moment. I still would start him. I still have him as a top 20 play, but the confidence is beginning to wane closer to the risk level that I was concerned about coming into the year. I had Mike Williams outside the top 35. And then at number 19 is DeAndre Hopkins, who I think will return against Seattle, but that's not a guarantee. And as long as he suits up, he's a very safe wide receiver to start. He has a big role in the red zone, and he usually scores a touchdown. So I think Kyler Murray will also suit up, and that bodes well for both him and DeAndre Hopkins. As long as he plays, I wouldn't be able to bench him. He's definitely a top 20 wide receiver in my opinion. And then at number 20 is Michael Pittman at Buffalo, and I feel like he's right on the edge of must-start territory. And if you were in a full PPR league, I think I would rank him even lower than this. But Michael Pittman has a pretty high yards per catch average, and he's also been scoring a lot of touchdowns lately. So there's some risk in this matchup. He's going to get the bulk of Tre'Davious White coverage, and the Bills have really been shutting down opposing wide receivers. So this is one of the worst matchups on the week, and it makes me concerned about Michael Pittman. But he's been safe enough lately to still rank inside the top 20. I still trust Michael Pittman enough, but he's definitely more of just a floor play this week. I can't imagine he goes over 100 yards. At number 21, I got DJ Moore versus Washington, and this is on paper a good matchup, and DJ Moore should have a good game. However, they looked amazing last week against Tampa Bay coming off the bye, and there may be a bit of hubris this week that causes them to underlook the Carolina Panthers. However, I don't really trust this quarterback situation. The fact that Cam Newton is back doesn't really bode well for the passing volume. And even though DJ Moore is clearly the number one wide receiver, I'm not sure if he's the number one target behind Christian McCaffrey. So there's a bit more risk with DJ Moore. There's always some upside, but it's very rare that he scores a touchdown. So just in his career. I'm not convinced that he pays off as a top 20 play. I think the risk for DJ Moore has definitely increased the last month. And then at number 22, I got Amari Cooper at Kansas City. And I think CD Lamb is definitely a big reason why. He's had some big blow-up games lately. But the main reason why I have Amari Cooper outside the top 20 is because I believe in the emergence of Michael Gallup. I think he is a big part of this offense. And if he's fully healthy, then the player whose targets he takes from the most is Amari Cooper. And that's why I still trust him. He's a very good wide receiver, too, to play. But without a touchdown, he's a little bit risky. That's why I only got him at number 22. At number 23 is Hunter Renfrow versus Cincinnati. And he's definitely the number one wide receiver for Derek Carr. And he's had a pretty significant role in the red zone the last couple of games. I think he'll probably see another end zone target and probably catch it. So that's why I trust the floor with Hunter Renfrow. But the upside just isn't really there. Very low yards per reception numbers. It's very unlikely that he goes over 60 receiving yards in any game. So that's my only concern with Hunter Renfrow. More of a floor play. That's why I got him here in flex territory at number 23. But still a very safe play. It's going to be very hard for me to rank him any lower than wide receiver 25. But it's also going to be very difficult for me to rank him any higher than wide receiver 20. And then at number 24, I got T. Higgins at Las Vegas, and I also think his touchdown upside is a bit limited. That's the main reason I have him this low. But he has a very consistent stream of targets, and I think he's clearly the number 2 option for Joe Burrow. He kind of has a Keenan Allen type of role, especially when they're on third and long. He gets the passes to move the chains, and I trust T. Higgins' workload. He's a very safe play. In my full PPR league, I'm actually going to play T. Higgins over Michael Pittman. But in half PPR, I would have it reverse. At number 25, I got Adam Thielen versus Green Bay. And again, I really trust this Green Bay secondary. I think they're going to give not only Justin Jefferson, but Adam Thielen and everyone on the Vikings a very difficult time. And that's why I'm just concerned that Adam Thielen does not pay off this week because he's very touchdown dependent. His stats are really low. Even though he gets a lot of targets, he rarely has a reception that goes for more than 10 yards. So that's my concern with Adam Thielen. He's just too touchdown dependent for me to rank any higher than this in this matchup. At number 26, I think a player with some great upside is Devontae Smith of Philadelphia going up against New Orleans. And Marshawn Lattimore does kind of concern me. However, Marshawn Lattimore is kind of an interesting player. I feel like he plays up to the competition rather than plays at an elite level every single game. And I don't think that he's going to perform as lights out on the road in Philly as he does at home against Mike Evans, for instance. So that's why I still trust Devontae Smith inside the top 30. There is a bit of risk. I'm not fully convinced that Jalen Hurts can get him the ball consistently and accurately every single game. But the last few games, Devontae Smith has blown up for a lot of points. So got to respect it. And I think this week he has a lot of upside as well. So that's why I got him at number 26 above Tyler Lockett versus Arizona, who is another player with a shit ton of upside. But with Tyler Lockett, it feels like it's all or nothing, and there isn't much safety in between. There's a lot of risk with Tyler Lockett. He could blow up and be the number 1 wide receiver on the week, put up 150 yards and a touchdown on 4 receptions or something. However, there's a lot of risk that, like last game, he's held without a catch for a considerable amount of time, and he barely gets it done. So I don't trust the Seattle offense, and the only player I think is a must-start is DK Metcalf. So play at your own risk, and if you still trust Tyler Lockett and want to roll the dice, just know that he could put up like 1 or 2 points as well. But obviously, you probably already know that if you have Tyler Lockett. At 28, I got Corey Davis versus Miami, who I still think is the number one wide receiver in New York, and I think the safest bet to score a touchdown. However, Elijah Moore and Jamison Crowder are much more involved, and they are kind of limiting Corey Davis's upside. So this week is kind of a bit of a test, in my opinion. If Elijah Moore eclipses him in targets, then I might start ranking them differently. But for now, I still trust Corey Davis as a top 30 play, the number one wide receiver for the Jets. At number 29 in the same game, I got Jalen Waddle. And I just don't really know and trust this quarterback situation. Jalen Waddle's target volume is pretty secure. However, his yards per reception are very low, so I would rank him higher in a full PPR format. However, this week, I think it's just going to be more of a run game, a run-heavy game script, that is. And I think they also want to get Mike Gesicki involved and make up for that bagel last week. So I think Jalen Waddle is still a pretty safe play, but I'd prefer him in a full PPR, not the most upside in just a half PPR. And then at number 30, a very interesting player who I am going to start on one of my rosters this week at the flex, Darnell Mooney versus Baltimore. And I'm a little bit concerned that he gets some Marlon Humphrey coverage, because if the Ravens know what's good for them, they will put a bit more coverage on Darnell Mooney, not Allen Robinson. But I think A-Rob will still draw a lot of Marlon Humphrey coverage away from Mooney, and I think he has the most upside by far of any Chicago wide receiver for fantasy purposes. I like his floor, and I also think he's getting more involved in the red zone. So there's quite a bit of upside with Darnell Mooney, and that's why I have him at number 30. But keeping it moving, at number 31, I got Marvin Jones versus San Francisco, and this matchup doesn't really move the needle. However, I still think that the Jaguars are going to struggle, and I'm kind of just banking on the garbage time in this one. However, the touchdown upside isn't really there for the Jaguars. They struggle to put up points, and they settle for a lot of field goals. So I don't fully trust Marvin Jones, but outside the top 30, you're probably a little bit desperate if you're considering these guys. At number 32, Sterling Shepard at Tampa Bay, and it's not a guarantee that he suits up, but if he does, he is my preferred option for the New York Giants wide receivers. There's a lot of injury risk. He's had dealt with a lot of hamstring injuries this year, and the last time we saw him, he wasn't even able to complete the first quarter. But in his limited action in that game, he saw 4 very early targets, and when he is on the field, they use him a lot. So it's possible that this is too low of a ranking, and he'll pay off as not only a top 25 wide receiver, but maybe a top 20 wide receiver this week. But I just don't fully trust it, and it's not 100% that he plays. So the Giants wide receivers are a bit too risky for me to consider must-start plays, but if you have to pick one, I definitely prefer Sterling Shepard. Just make sure he suits up before you start him. At number 33, I got Christian Kirk at Seattle, and there's a chance that he is the number one wide receiver in Arizona yet again if DeAndre Hopkins is unable to suit up, but I think that will happen, and that's why I only have Christian Kirk at number 33. I don't think this game is going to be super competitive, and although I trust the floor with Christian Kirk, there's still just a lot of options to feed, and I'm not convinced he scores a touchdown, so that's why I only have him at number 33. He's a bit too touchdown dependent for me to consider a safe top 30 option. At number 34 is Chase Claypool going up against the Chargers, and it's not a guarantee that he suits up, but if he does, he usually gets a decent workload. But the Chargers are a difficult matchup. I think they will hold the Pittsburgh receivers in check, and if Mason Rudolph starts again, then there's pretty much no upside for any of the receivers in Pittsburgh. So definitely some concerns and red flags with Chase Claypool. I'd rather not rely on him in Week 11. And then at 35, Elijah Moore versus Miami, who's on a bit of a hot streak and may eclipse Corey Davis if they want to get the rookie more and more involved and set up for success next year. So I think he's an interesting player to watch, and if you're looking for a high upside dart throw, could do a lot worse than Elijah Moore, but obviously he is still a Jet and there is some risk involved. But at least 6 targets in his last 4 games and pretty consistent touchdown upside as well. I think Elijah Moore is a very interesting option who could offer some league-winning potential as we close out the season. At number 36, Rashad Bateman is also a very interesting wide receiver. He has some league winning potential too, because his role is starting to emerge, and he looks to have eclipsed Sammy Watkins as the wide receiver 2 in Baltimore, and they have a lot of upside to score. So Rashad Bateman is a very interesting play, but still just more of a desperate flex option. I think he needs to perform well at least one more week before I start ranking him inside the top 30. At number 37, I got Kendrick Bourne, who is my preferred fantasy wide receiver in New England. I think he has the most upside, and he's also involved in the run game. He gets some designed runs as well. So there's a decent amount of upside, but not a ton of volume in the New England passing attack, and that's why you are banking on the touchdown. If he doesn't score, then he is a fantasy liability. At number 38 is AJ Green at Seattle, and he's missed a couple games recently, but it looks like he'll suit up for this one. But there's just a lot of players involved in Arizona, and that's why he's just more of a floor play, also rather touchdown dependent. And then at number 39, I got Michael Gallup, who I mentioned as one of the reasons why I've downgraded Amari Cooper a little bit, and that matchup is against Kansas City, not Dallas, but I still think that he offers some upside, and if he were to score a touchdown, then I think he would be a pretty good flex option. That's not a guarantee, and there's a lot of weapons in Dallas as well, so kind of the same problem applies to him as it does to AJ Green. But an interesting wide receiver 3. There aren't that many who I rank inside the top 40, but Michael Gallup is definitely interesting. And then at number 40 is Jarvis Landry versus Detroit, who I think has some potential, a decent floor in this game, but we know that Baker Mayfield doesn't throw the ball very much, and Detroit is terrible against the run, and the Browns are a run-first team. So there may be very limited volume in the passing game, and obviously those deep passes go to Donovan Peoples-Jones, not Jarvis Landry, but I think he is just a safer floor play than Donovan Peoples-Jones. That's why I have him at number 40. Those are my wide receiver rankings. I'll put up my top 40 here through the end of the video. And if you enjoyed this video, go ahead and smash that like button. If you got a start-sit question, go ahead and leave me a comment down below. I'll be happy to get to it as quickly as I can. And subscribe to the channel for more content. My name is Adam Riancho, and thank you for watching Nice and Blunt.